Architecture has been an important aspect of human existence ever since the first humans walked the earth, as they sought to make their environment more comfortable to live in. Over millennia, the art of designing and constructing buildings has evolved into many different forms. From Stone Age to Egyptian, from Roman to Greek, societies have found a way to embrace and change architecture to fit their daily needs and landscape. But out of the 19th century emerged something new, something different. This art form was based on minimalism and efficiency. It was known as modern architecture. Hello and welcome, my name is Jacob Wiebe. Architecture has been a passion of mine for the past few years, and I've always been fascinated with the process behind making houses. Before middle school, I was drawn to activities where I could experiment with design ideas. Sometimes those were in my sketchbook, with Lego, or by using Minecraft. I attended architecture camps through the West Van Museum and learned about the design and key architects. I also experimented with 3D modeling software called SketchUp after being introduced to it in camp. For this presentation, I will be narrowing my focus on architecture to my favorite style, West Coast Modern. This type of architecture appeals to me because I love the simplicity and how the design is dictated by its environment. To begin, I will share with you a general overview of modern architecture and how it all began. Next, I'll be talking about the philosophy behind modern architecture called modernism, and some key architects in the forming of this philosophy. I will then share with you 3 case studies I have done on exceptional buildings across the Lower Mainland, and discuss which characteristics make them a modern design. Finally, I will show you the house I designed on SketchUp, and I will be going over its West Coast modern elements. The influence of modern architecture surrounds us, from institutional and corporate buildings to private residences. It has provided people with creative talents the ability to influence how people live. At the end of the 19th century, modern architecture evolved because people had a desire for something different from the historical architecture styles of the past. Society considered architecture before the Industrial Revolution to be no longer relevant because there was access to new and better materials which could allow for more efficient living, and the faster production of housing and buildings. Intricate architecture before the Industrial Revolution was only for the rich, and since the housing had become more affordable, people of the lower class were developing an interest in the aesthetic of their home. From that desire came an opportunity for creative minds at that time to develop new styles, which are focused on functionality and efficiency. The idea behind modern architecture was that ornamentation of the past was excessive, and function should be the driving force behind design, which led to the embracing of minimalism. Western cultures were undergoing revolutions in technology, engineering, and building materials. This was known as the Industrial Revolution. This led to the development of modern architecture movement, which benefited from the many industries which supported the production of new technology and techniques. The revolution came with use of cast iron, plate glass, and reinforced concrete to build structures that were lighter, stronger, and taller. New styles of decorating emerged. An example of this is the Art Nouveau style, which began in the 1890s, and with it came new styles of decoration based on plant and floral forms. The theory behind the modernist movement was utility was as important as appearance, and that products made by hand were preferable to machine-made ones. Form was to follow function, which meant that buildings should be designed so that the essential structure dictated the form. Open plan interiors were common, and they were light-filled and very spacious. The decoration of functional objects which had been done in the past was seen as inefficient and wasteful, which led for the desire of minimalism. Less was considered more, and there were minimal or no ornamentation, and there tended to be a white or neutral palette used. By the end of the 1920s, people were traveling more, and architects for the first time were able to meet in person and share ideas. This philosophy had a large impact on architecture in Western societies, as it was a great adaptation to post-World War living. After World War II, millions of soldiers were returning back to their homeland with little money. Modern architecture was a great solution for this problem because it was designed to be cheap and efficient. West Coast modern style developed in the 1930s from a new approach to suburban living in a rainforest climate. This style first appeared in Vancouver, Seattle, California, and Portland, and became an influential style for 3 decades. They incorporated style elements from these inspirations into designs that respected the natural environment of the building. The result was a style of building primarily domestic, with a close relationship to the individual site's climate, terrain, and rainforest setting. West Coast modern homes were modest in scale and budget, and were unfussy homes set at ground level with flat or low pitch roofs that might contain a floor-to-ceiling window, or clerestory, which is a high section of wall that contains a window above eye level. The purpose is to emit light, fresh air, or both. They have deep eaves and often a ceiling with an exposed post and beam structure. And the front of the house tends to be divided into panels of windows with stucco or wood siding. Although some show a very dull blank face to the street, they typically have a seamless transition between interior space and garden, or a wraparound courtyard. There was a feeling that barriers between the inside and outside dissolved, and the natural environment seemed to become a part of the design. Extensive use of glass was done to maximize the natural light and take advantage of many views. Local environmental characteristics of rainfall, sunshine, and views were always a consideration in the West Coast modern home. Frank Lloyd Wright was an American architect who lived from 1867 to 1959 and had a very original and highly productive career that spanned 70 years. He was an architect, interior designer, writer, and educator, and he designed more than 1,000 structures, of which 532 were completed, which include offices, churches, schools, libraries, bridges, museums, and many other building types. An interesting fact is that UNESCO designated 8 of them, including Falling Water and the Guggenheim Museum, as World Heritage Sites in 2019. This designation means that the buildings are seen as having outstanding universal value, and they are to be preserved and protected under very strict guidelines as a result. Throughout his entire career, he believed in designing structures based on his philosophy of organic architecture, which meant that structures were designed to suit their inhabitants' environment, purpose, and time. In his early years, he developed a style which became known as Prairie style, which became the basis of 20th century residential design in the United States, and was a breath of fresh air after the confined and closed-in architecture of the Victorian era. Arthur Charles Erickson was a famous Vancouver-based Canadian architect, professor, and urban planner, who was born in 1924 and died at aged 84 in 2009. He designed over 700 buildings worldwide. Erickson's buildings are often modernist concrete structures that are designed to respond to the natural conditions of the climate. On his design philosophy, Arthur Erickson said, "Architecture is the art of composing spaces in response to existing environmental and urbanistic conditions to answer a client's needs." One of Erickson's finest designs is a building I'm sure you've all passed by, the Law Courts in downtown Vancouver. In the early 1970s, the provincial government wanted to tear down the old courthouse, which is now the present-day art gallery, and build a 55-story tower in its place. As an alternative, Erickson came up with the idea to design the building like it was laying on its side, to be more accessible and fitted to its environment. The provincial law court is a perfect example of how Erickson could seamlessly incorporate a building into its environment. As you might know, the building connects to a 3-block-long roof, which includes the Robson Square rooftop garden, which is completely accessible by the public. Erickson's noteworthy contributions and innovative designs earned him a gold medal from the American Institute of Architects in 1986, which is the highest honor which can be given to an architect, and he was the first Canadian to have ever received it. Leading up to this reward, Erickson had been awarded many awards and degrees, including gold medals from the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada and the French Academy of Architecture in 1986. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, you may have noticed that it's full of fantastic residential architecture, mainly due to the case study houses. In 1945, Art and Architecture magazine commissioned 8 nationally known architects to participate in the case study house program, where they planned, designed, and construct 8 houses using a set budget. Each house was to address the specifications of a particular living issue in Southern California. The program's purpose was to challenge architects of the time to build a house in California that was relatively affordable, replicatable, and designed for post-World War II family living, with an emphasis on new techniques in the house construction. Additionally, the program's intent was to provide practical assistance to the public with solutions and construction ideas for the future years post-war when they would be looking to renovate their homes, rather than having an expectation of immediate application during a time of resource constraints and affordability challenges. The program ran from 1945 to 1966. After World War II in 1945, there was a high demand for single-family residential housing. and the program was very successful at generating interest, as over 350,000 visitors were attracted to the display houses. The public was able to evaluate how successful the architects had been in achieving their goal. Famous architects Charles Ames and Quincy Jones, along with many others, are architects who were involved and are of high importance to this day. The case study houses designed are considered to be of cultural value, and people are still interested in many of the houses built through the program, many of which still stand in Los Angeles and other parts of California today, with some being over 70 years old. As much as the case study house program was well respected for that point in time, there are present-day needs which aren't addressed in this program. While architecture of the case study house are still elegant and timeless, there are several changes that a modern house needs. A layout adapted to the speed in today's fast-paced world, a large kitchen space to hold more than a single person, a living space accommodated to today's modern family lifestyle, and an office space where people can work from home. These were not needed back when the case study house program was originally developed, meaning there is a lot of room to evolve. Over the course of a few months, I went to 3 unique West Coast modern design buildings. The first place I visited was the Henriksen House, which is located on the west side of Bowen Island on a rock face. The next place I visited was the Museum of Anthropology near UBC, designed by Arthur Erickson. The final place I visited was a house in West Vancouver, which is nearly finished construction in early March. This house was pointed out to me by my external advisor, architect Chris Lee. Jen and Michael, her husband, built this house on the west side of Bowen Island in 2011. It was designed in the West Coast modern style by Bowen architect James Tuere. In 2014, it won an award from the Wood Design Award for interior beauty. The Henderson House contains one low-pitched roof that slopes downwards from towards the front of the house, and some flat roofs that cover the entrance and back deck. There's also a large low-pitched roof that hangs over the front floor-to-ceiling window. The floor-to-ceiling window is on the front corner of the house and sticks up from the main body, slightly overhanging the driveway. This is called a sunroom. The Henriksen House has many deep eaves, a majority of them being on the right and left sides. Some roofs have deeper eaves than the others, such as the front portion of their house, where there's a large eave that overhangs the driveway. And the sides of the house have smaller ones, as you can see over there. The Henriksen House has a significant amount of post and beam features, such as the front roof, where the post and beam can be visible below the large eave. Post and beam features are also obvious when you look up at the ceiling on the first floor, where it reveals an open joist system with hanging lights. The house is made up of a large percentage of wood, and there's no stucco, which is a material which is sometimes a characteristic of West Coast modern homes. Instead, the front of the house is made up of mostly made up of corrugated metal and concrete, but the side of the house is almost entirely cedar. This is because cedar is commonly seen in West Coast modern architecture because it is a tree which is local to the West Coast. The Museum of Anthropology at UBC was built in 1976 and is one of Arthur Erickson's finest pieces of work. The MOA is an award-winning concrete and glass structure which till this day still astonishes viewers with its incredible modern architecture. This building incorporates almost all aspects of modern architecture and beautifully pieces them together, creating a magnificent work of art. The MOA doesn't have any low-pitched roofs. Instead, it has flat roofs that step up like large concrete stairs. This stepping is repeated on plan on the north and south sides of the building. These stairs angle upwards, revealing the large floor-to-ceiling window. The MOA has several deep eaves, most of them being above the front and back floor-to-ceiling windows. These eaves are large and rectangular and stick up from the side. The eaves relies on the architect's preference and determines the amount of sunlight exposed to the building. The MOA doesn't exactly have the same post and beam structure as most West Coast modern buildings do, the reason being the building is made out of concrete. Most West Coast modern houses buildings have a post and beam structure made of wood planks. Yet the MOA has a unique type of concrete structure. There are large concrete pillars that stretch from one side of the building and smaller ones that overlap, creating a unique post and beam structure made out of concrete. The side sections of the MOA mainly consist of concrete with floor-to-ceiling windows every so often, yet the front and back of the building have large 3-story windows. The windows in the front are meant so you can look down the ramp and out through the back windows because Arthur Erickson wanted to create a visually appealing and welcoming entrance. The large windows in the back are positioned in order to look at the large pond in the First Nations building. The West Van House was started in 2019 and is currently being finished. The site is located below the highway on a beautiful lot overlooking the ocean. The site has a large hill in the shape of an L that wraps around the side of the driveway, allowing for lots of garden space and unique landscaping. The house is very interesting and aesthetically pleasing, as it consists of very basic shapes and pieces them together on unusual angles. The West Van House doesn't have many flat roofs. In fact, almost all the roofs are low-pitched. The house has a unique roof that angles downwards from the highest point on the left side of the house that overhangs the balcony. Most windows on this house are set back away from the wall, yet on the back side there's a large floor-to-ceiling window that reveals the stairs. The West Van House has deep eaves on every side of the house, built into different sections based on the roof line. The main eave on this house is covering the front balcony. This eave was so big that a concrete wall was put on the other side to keep it supported. The West Van House uses a lot of grey wood, especially on the front of the house. This wood siding house brings some diversity to the design, and overall, I think it brings it to life. The West Van House has many panels and windows, a majority of them being on the front dining room. These windows are unique as they can slide open, connecting the dining room with the outdoor patio. This feature is a perfect example of how a house can be incorporated into its environment. Once I learned about the West Coast modern design, I decided to move on to the next stage of my project, designing my house. But before designing a house or building, you always have to analyze and inspect the lot in which you're using. The landscape you build a house on has a significant impact on how the house will end up looking, as modern architecture is an adaptation to the natural landscape. The house that I designed was to be located on the west coast of Bowen Island on a beautiful lot overlooking the ocean. Bowen Island has a lot to offer in terms of housing space. There are some stunning lots along the coast of Bowen, and I particularly like the ones with steep rock faces that overlook the ocean. Jen, my advisor, and I explored Bowen for some interesting lots that appealed to me, and we eventually found, and they were eventually an inspiration for my design. One lot in particular that caught my attention, the lot had a large rock face that gradually sloped downwards towards the ocean, and tall cedar trees which grew on both sides of the lot. I first started designing my house by brainstorming ideas through books and the internet. I was inspired by the architects Lloyd Wright and Arthur Erickson because their designs were very unique and interesting. After receiving some inspiration, I thought about how my design was going to fit on my lot and how I was going to make the most efficient design possible. Because my lot was situated on a cliff overlooking the water, I wanted the back of my design to be open to lots of natural light and give off a beautiful view of the ocean. As one of the design features of West Coast modern architecture is for the front to be plain and boring and the back to be open and beautiful, I found this lot to be a perfect representation of this feature. My specifications for the house were for it to be a single-family home spanning around 3,500 square feet, with 3 bathrooms, a large kitchen, a dining area that has a view of the ocean, a master suite on the second floor also with a view of the ocean, a basement, a large patio which could be used for dining, and a large media room in the basement. Another thing I wanted in my design was something I saw doing my case studies. The West Vancouver house had a bridge inside of the house that separated the upstairs into 2 parts. I thought this design feature was very interesting because I'd never seen a bridge built inside of a house. After completing my design specifications, I decided that I should start designing my house. When designing my house, I used a software called SketchUp. SketchUp is a 3D modeling website which some architects use to draft out their ideas and give their clients an idea of what their house will look like. I've had some experience with this website as I've used it a bit in the past, but most of it was new. The design process was fairly tricky because I had to create a 3D model of landscape through a few pictures and memory. Once I finished the landscape, I moved on to working on the foundation of the house. I built the foundation in steps because it was built into a rock face, meaning there are different levels in which the house is situated. Once I finished the foundation, I started working on the first floor. I looked back at my specifications and made sure they're all incorporated. The only thing I changed is that I decided I was going to build a garage that stuck out of the front of the house. Once I finished the first floor, I started working on the second, where I incorporated the bridge, separating the houses into two sections. And finally, I made the roof, where I incorporated another important design feature, deep eaves. I was inspired by the deep eaves on the Henderson House. On the left side of the house, there's a deep eave that continued down the side of the house, and I decided that I was going to include that in my design. After weeks of editing and creating the design and countless rounds of touch-ups, my house is finally complete. My house is built into the side of a rock face with a large concrete base supporting the structure. Because of the sloping rock face, I built my house so that the bottom floor was small and had no windows, as it acted as the base of the house, with two larger floors on top which were able to let in lots of natural light because of this feature. My goal for the house was so it fit into its environment, so I made it so that you enter through the front and the back would be open to large floor-to-ceiling windows with a beautiful view of the ocean and a large patio. My house has a large flat roof that covers the top of the house and a smaller one that covers the garage. I do not have any low-pitch roofs as I felt like they did not suit my design. I designed my house quite a distance from neighbors, so this allowed me to have nearly the entire front portion of the house to be glass. My house has many deep eaves, as my roof overhangs almost every side, especially the sides where I continued the eave along the side, which was a feature which was inspired by the Henriksen House. My house is fairly unique, yet there are some sides of the house where I wanted there to be no windows, such as the sides of the house, because I felt like this would allow for some privacy. I designed these sides to have no windows because I felt like the rest of the house was very open. My house has many panels of windows, especially on the front, where I wanted the water to be visible from almost everywhere. Windows also let in a lot of natural light and they connect the house with the outside environment, which is a key West Coast modern feature. During the process of conducting my Masterworks research, I came to realize how much depth there is to the world of architecture and how many people and cultures it has taken to bring it to its place today. As society and culture shift and refocus, modern architecture is likely to become the leading ideology in the future as it embodies a relationship with nature, our environment, and sustainability. Modern architecture is changing constantly. New ideas and technologies are being innovated, and new styles and materials are being used in practical ways which are helping keep modern architecture as the leading design ideology. Modern architecture features can be found in many worldwide structures, ranging from apartments to houses, to museums to stadiums. And the key feature that binds them isn't something you can see. It's much more personal than that. It's how the building makes us feel. Thank you.
Mr. Wiebe, I am so proud of you. So this love of architecture, I know, started a long time ago, but the first time that I saw it in you was in your grade 8 architectometry project.
Yes.
Where some of you guys saw it on the wall, where you guys were there. Massive Minecraft hotel with many stories and in-ground pools and restaurants and stuff. And I said, this kid knows what he wants to do for his Masterworks. So pleased at how this has turned out. That was a beautiful slideshow, like so aesthetically on it. And I can see that you have an architect's eye. So that makes me really happy because you're going to have to be a great architect to afford to build the house you designed. Now it's time for questions. The praise will continue, but my question for you is this. Of all the design features that make a West Coast modern house, which is the one that you think is the most striking? So as you're driving past rows of houses and you go, that's one.
I feel like the most important design feature is how the building is incorporated into its environment, because that's what makes the house. Like, a West Coast modern house is so dictated by its environment, it's just, yeah.
Well, and I think how it fits into the environment, but I also feel like windows, because that's what draws the environment inside of the
Yeah,
house.
that's also important.
Yeah. Sorry, just one more thing. What was it about the case study houses that both you and I were completely surprised by? Do you remember? When we started looking at pictures of them and went,
Oh yeah, how those houses were built 70 years ago, and they look.
you guys remember the
like,
case study houses that we showed in California? They're 70 years old.
They look awesome and stuff.
I know.
Like you would drive by and you think that it's just, oh yeah, it's just built 5 years ago, but those things are 70 years old.
Yeah.
Mr. Wiebe, that was beautiful and informative. Super, super interesting. Yeah, architecture is totally the most expensive art form, I think. But I wonder, as we move forward, it's also, you mentioned this, you said we're getting new technology, new materials, and it's getting more affordable, in quotes, for the masses. What's in the future? Did you come across any ways that they're making buildings now or looking towards making buildings that can make them either cheaper so people can afford them, or stronger or bigger, or what?
I haven't looked too much into this, but houses nowadays, so modern architecture before, or houses have just been getting like larger windows, they've been using like new materials. Like I did research on my math project actually, and there's this coating you could put on a building, which could actually like, because it was put on an apartment building, and it was a feature which allowed like, I think it was protect, I don't remember, but it was like a feature which helped with the environment. I think it had something to do with like generating oxygen or something. But there's like new features that are being added to houses which are like helping the environment.
Thanks, Mr. Wiebe. I loved your presentation. It's really timely for me because I love West Coast modern architecture, and my family and I are designing starting to design a house on Cortez that has a really similar view of the house you chose on Bowen. It's on the ocean, it's got rocks going down, quite a slope down the ocean, a lot of trees, and I'm wondering, you know, a budget, as Adrian touched on, is always foremost in our minds when we're designing something like this, and I can't possibly include all of those beautiful things that you have in your house. What would you say is that, other than windows, because I think that was already answered, what would you say is the number one feature that I should consider in my house?
Well, always on a modern house, or West Coast modern house, you should always have a patio which is connected to a dining room, because you can just open up windows and you're just outside.